Thank you everybody for coming to watch Inside Opera. And it's terrific to have here today our illustrious founding artistic director, Mr. Timothy Vernon, or should I say Maestro Timothy Vernon, and one of our most popular stage directors that we have, not only with Pacific Opera Victoria, but with theater and opera companies throughout the country and outside of it, Glynis Leyshon. And the two of you have been collaborating together on operas for more decades than probably any of us, which is to enumerate. And we've been asked today to talk a little bit about the importance of the arts, the performing arts in particular, to us, to Timothy and Glynis in their lives, and particularly how it is felt during this unprecedented time of pandemic. We're now well into our third month, and so we've probably all found a way of dealing with it, thinking about it, preparing for it, grieving over it. So I wondered if the first thing both of you would like to address is just a little bit about the importance of these live events in your life as both an audience member and a participant, as a professional. Glynis.
Oh, big question. And when you reached out and gave this very interesting and very personal topic for this dialogue, I thought immediately of a meeting that I had just participated in. It was a Zoom meeting, as we all get used to having. And it was with the creative team for the Valkyrie for Pacific Opera. Erica brought us all together. And, you know, it was what so many of my friends and colleagues are facing at the moment, the discussion of I won't say cancellation, but the postponement, the idea that we're withdrawing from something that we were actively creating, actively putting together, actively discussing, and working on a much longer time frame. And this involved the lighting designer, Kevin Lamont, and the Nancy Bryant, the costume designer, Pamela Johnson, all artists that POV and POV's audience know very well. And it's been a privilege to work with. And the meeting was proceeding normally. It was a business meeting and a friends talking and a chum chat and how weird to see everybody, and our hair was long and when did you get a haircut? That kind of mixed but professional meeting, until I reached out to Pam Johnson and I said, Pam, you're being very, very quiet, which isn't like you. And she stopped for a moment and started to cry. And that's when everything shifted and changed, and we became artists grieving truly for what our experience and our art form is about, which is live contact. And yes, we will all find all kinds of ways to continue to work, because that's who we are, to tell stories, and there'll be different ways of telling stories. And I'm sure that'll be something that we all discuss. But what I hadn't appreciated and what I hadn't allowed myself was to feel the grief for that lack of audience contact. Because that's, for me, my decision in life with the work that I do. That's the core. And the response of that audience and how we relate and understand and synthesize so much of what we're doing through the response of the audience. So I know that we will survive. I know the Globe Theatre shut down when the plague hit London. I know we will be back. But in the meantime, I grieve that lack of contact, and I'm allowing myself to do that, as well as challenging myself to look at and think of different ways to tell stories and continue my creative life.
Timothy, thank you, Glynis.
Glynis puts the case for the active participant beautifully with eloquence and her usual insights, which are profound and based on a lot of great experience. I see a divided thing for me. And one is everything Glynis has said, I completely feel and agree with. The impulse to share, the impulse to communicate directly, not by some medium, but directly, is surely at the core of every artist, every performing artist's impulse. So when that is thwarted, there is a sense of truncation in your life, in the flow of your communication, which is what you really want to bring to performance. And also, of course, contact with colleagues. And you understand what this is.
Mm-hmm.
You, Robert, are a brilliant pianist, and you can be in a room with one person and have an incredible, fulfilling experience. It's not quite the same for a conductor, you know? So there is that, and I miss the colleagues, not just the colleagues that are playing, but the working colleagues, working with Glynis in the room, getting something ready. That's crucial, and that's certainly important. What I've found, though, is that this whole pandemic situation, this whole isolation, this whole, the sense of separateness and aloneness is very much in tune with something that Glynis understands also, and that is the work of an artistic director, because that is already lonely work. You don't make artistic decisions by committee, at least you don't if the company's any good and has given you the trust, as 2 theater companies have given Glynis the trust. And I've enjoyed the unbelievable support for so many decades of this opera company, with boards and management coming and going and somehow not finding reasons to kick me out onto the street. So I'm very grateful. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want to make a joke of this. The preoccupation with the art and the decisions that result from that are essentially singular. They happen in the imagination of the person who's been given the responsibility for making those decisions. And in that sense, I find this kind of withdrawal only helps to focus that attention on those things. It doesn't mean you don't consult. It doesn't mean there isn't, discussion. But fundamentally, wouldn't you agree, Glynis, that those decisions come out of your own imagination, your own experience, your own aspirations, your own desire for things to be a certain way in connection with the piece? We're not writing them. I'm not anyway. And I don't know what it's like to have to deal with genius. I mean, imagine being a genius. Imagine wrestling that to the ground. I mean, dealing with talent is hard enough, God knows. So I don't find this isolation so completely estranging, because a large part of me is invested in making those decisions and thinking about them. And as I said, that's a kind of lonely function.
I was wondering, most people are drawn to the theater and to music because of love for the theater and music. So do you miss having the opportunity to actually go and sit in an audience and listen to a concert or see a play or see an opera? I was thinking the other day that I grew up in Victoria, haunted by the refrain that was repeated far too often, that Victoria is a place for the newlywed and the nearly dead.
No.
Anything to do. I don't think that's ever been true, but it feels like there was always so much to do. I fear I took it for granted a little bit. And one of the things that I want to do the minute that it's possible is to go to more concerts and go to Herman's more often, go to more performances. How do you feel about that? Do you miss this, being part of an audience as well as being part of a team that's producing?
Absolutely. I do. Absolutely. I think you're right, Robert. And I think that's one of the things that I had so loved about being in Victoria, is not feeling the isolation of an island, but rather a very connected and vibrant arts community. And the chance, actually, after I stopped being an artistic director, oddly enough, I got to see more, because I had more time. I was in less meetings. I was in less, my administrative life, arts administration life, wasn't as dominant. So I was able to see, and have been able to see, so much more. See the young people perform at the Canadian College of Performing Arts, where I was able to direct them, but then to see those young people and their graduation ceremony and how they managed to do a Zoom performance for their final piece is humbling and exciting. But I did want to see them live. That was I'm grateful for this technology. I'm grateful for what it provides. I don't know if you saw it, Robert, but I did a play this year called Unity 1918, which was, as I think of it now, shockingly relevant, in that it was about the pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic, and how it affected a small Saskatchewan town, and written by Kevin Kerr, Governor General award-winning playwright here in Victoria. And it was a wonderful experience. But once again, the so much that was going on in that play now filters my sensibility, and I so much wish that audiences could share that experience now, because it does, a wonderful playwright like Kevin, a wonderful writer, helps give word to the fears, the dreams, the aspirations, the sense of despair, all the mix of emotions that we're all feeling. So I can't wait to get back to the hall.
You too, Timothy?
Yes, I mean, obviously, I mean, music only lives when it's played. I mean, it isn't a matter of dots on a page. It has to be brought into sounding life. And that's always intriguing. That's always spellbinding. It's always interesting and occasionally frustrating. And of course, when you do a lot of it yourself, when you're performing a lot, your instinct, I mean, you would at times, because you become self-absorbed in what you have to do and how you want it to go and what you're thinking and so on and so forth, you don't want to go and hear, say, the same piece played a different way right at the moment. So I find myself sometimes crossing the street to avoid going and hearing even my best friends play something, because I want to be left to think about it. When I'm free of that, I love exploring how people think about music and what they bring to it and how they do it. So it's a mixed bag as far as performance is concerned. Especially if you arrive, and I don't know, there are times in life when you're very decided about how you feel a piece should go. I think it's the more experience you have, the more breadth of tolerance and understanding you bring. I speak entirely for myself. I used to be extremely dogmatic because I came from a very dogmatic regime of training and schooling and everything else. And I've come to recognize how narrow, how even in some senses parochial, that may have been going back all those decades. So I try to be more encompassing in my view, and therefore more sympathetic to a variety of approaches, and less irritated by what I think is, you know, nonsense in the concert hall.
Well, you're also a theater goer, and
oh, sure.
Yeah.
And
I was leaving Glynis to talk more about that side of things, because after all, she's
and
not
fair,
the director,
fair enough.
she's
That's
an actress, and she's got all this stuff going. So, you know.
and we've been asked to focus on what it is that we do professionally, but I know all three of us are interested in going to art galleries and interested in seeing what all sorts of local are doing. The diversity of art also is something for me, outside perhaps of great literature, that just requires an experience with other people. And so I miss that a lot. Now, you mentioned Zoom meetings, Glynis, and Timothy and I have been having Zoom chats and visits. And I teach online every day, 6 days a week. Every single student I had wanted to switch to online and classes. And many organizations are putting some sort of presentation online, whether it's an archival one that they happen to have, or whether it's something new that's being put together. Many people who have worked with Pacific Opera are doing this. Now, I think this is one of those temporary measures that's tiding us over. Even during any of these meetings, there's likely to be, of course, technical glitches in Zoom, no matter how much you've invested in your technical setup. But again, how do you feel about what the role is for these sorts of online performances and presentations? Do you feel they are helping us stay in the public's eye, or do you feel that they are at best a kind of pale imitation of what we're all longing to go back to?
What do you think, Timothy?
Oh, I thought you were going to start this. Well, I think Robert has mentioned both sides of this thing. In other words, yes, it maintains a kind of a connection. It is by way of a kind of echo, a kind of, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't like to think of myself as a backward-looking person. And that includes not being so thrilled with the huge plethora of 10, 15, 5, 20-year-old recordings that are now all over the network. I mean, you can go online, you can watch, and they're fantastic, treasure troves. I even, sat through 10 of hours finding clips that would be appropriate to put up. And I find there just isn't what Glynis referred to earlier, the immediacy, the moment, the connection, the being in the room, the feeling, the sense that this performance is being done just for me here in the room, that it's reaching me personally, that it's stirring my soul. Yes, a recording can do that, absolutely. And don't I have a lot of them? That's not the point. The point is the reality of communication, again, is missing from all of these things. However, I think it's a matter of really understanding the idiom, really coming to understand the medium, what it can do, how far it can go, how expressive and spontaneous it can be. And trust me, Pacific Opera's on the way to exploring these things, and Glynis is a huge and important part of it, because we want to find how can we take the idea of not having an audience in the room and yet deliver something that has immediacy. And obviously there's one place that this has been accomplished, in film. Movies can do that for us. And I don't mean films of staged performances, which is a totally different thing. And when you see a stage, you go to an opera or a play, you see it, it's wonderful. And then you see a tape made of it. Immediately you're at a great distance from that first experience. But in a movie, we're used to giving ourselves to the experience of the moment, even though we know it's really only two-dimensional. It's light on the surface, basically, is what we're reacting to. I want to find out, how can we get some of that immediacy with the technology we have into producing, even without an audience, small works, small but powerful works, small works with humor, with drama, with all the things that we expect from opera, and bring them in this framework in such a way that as a viewer, one has the same, or something like the same immediacy of experience. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're seeing people wrestle with. I think you're right, Robert. Technologies like Zoom allow for conversations like this. They allow for us, you have a wide and devoted audience who miss you and the guests that you gather in conversation. And I think conversation is something that we can start to provide. I think that the idea of teaching on Zoom is something that I'm embarking on with colleagues in St. John's and all across the country. The ensemble for hours, the John Astasio opera that was to be at the National Arts Center, sadly is not going to be performed this summer, but we will continue to meet as an ensemble and work through various ideas. But what Timothy is talking about is something we've had really dynamic conversations around, and that is, how is there a way? How do we take our art form, and in this case, less theater and more opera, and start to build it with an eye to a different medium, a video medium, rather than staging it for cameras or for an archival that then edits into some sort of performance mode. Really, is there something that we can bring where all of a sudden people singing instead of speaking doesn't strike us as particularly odd? And why do they have such a wide mouth? And my goodness, I'm seeing inside their saliva now. So we're wrestling with opening and playing with some of the mysteries. So, whether we read our Marshall McLuhan or not, we're now having to start, as artists, exposing and thinking about a form perhaps that was not our decision to create in, but perhaps we can and will. I think this is where young artists are going to be very interesting, and the work that they start to create will be very exciting for us. I think that there, as Timothy mentioned, there's so many pieces that have resonance now, and they are perhaps smaller scale. Not because they have to be for financial or technical or whatever reasons, but because actually that kind of intense psychological study, that kind of intense connection will prove to be more illuminating than, God, I wish I could see a chorus because they're so exciting. Opera will always give us that kind of scale in the live performance, and we love it. But is there a way to bring it to the intimacy without it being reduced and with it revealing something other? And that, as an artist, is a challenge that I think we're all excited by.
Absolutely. Actually, Timothy and I were having this conversation during one of our wine-fueled get-togethers on Saturday evenings.
Thank God for those.
Thank God for those. But the work that immediately jumped to my mind that would be an incredibly stimulating and challenging one to put on film, exactly as you described it, Glynis, would be one that we did in 1997. All three of us were on it, which is Turn of the Screw.
So funny you should say that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because on top of everything else, it benefits immensely from a feeling of slight claustrophobia.
Yeah. You start to go and think of all the work that, wow, what would happen if instead of this large scale experience, if we just followed one particular person and from a different kind of point of view, and for the singer too, the idea that the singer can really expose themselves to the psychology and the story, as opposed to the demands, absolute and magnificent, of being a singer with an orchestra in a hall with an acoustic environment that they have to deal with. How will that change things? What will that do? It's not to give the same experience, or as Timothy said, a pale version, but to find something different, something perhaps engaging in its own way of real validity to the audience, rather than filler until we can get back.
Well, I think that's very exciting, the idea that this is offering us an opportunity to grow in different directions. You mentioned the younger members of the theater and music community. I think, now I have to say that many of the people I consider younger members of the community, like the Matthew Payne of Scam Theater or people like that, I think they're in their 40s already. To me, that's a young person. But there's still, of course, many people even younger than that who are doing incredible creative things. And
I'm thinking of a lot of Robert, I keep forgetting this can't be this kind of conversation. We have to wait, do it. Exactly, but the young people who are already more fluent technologically, I'm interested to see where they go. I will find that interesting. And I'm also excited to challenge myself. You can rail against, or you can say, hey, let's leap aboard this shaky raft and see where it takes me. I mean, that to me is exciting, rather than, as I say, doing a production as I would do it for theater and then finding it on film. I think that's viable, it's possible, probably can be very rewarding, but I'd love to see if there's something else there, something different.
So
Robert, your reference to youth,
yeah.
That is to say, you began by quoting the Victoria motto about the newlywed and nearly dead. I think things have changed so much that really there are a lot more nearly wed people in Victoria with a lot of...
Oh, Tim, you had to do that, didn't you? Yeah, had to get that in.
That's okay. It was earned. So one of the things that I was watching and looking, on Facebook and things, we get so many articles bombarding us, is the idea, and there have been several articles written, that if this doesn't stop soon, classical music will die, or there will be no more orchestras. I don't believe that at all, because things came back after the 1919 epidemic, and perhaps we'll have to work harder. Perhaps they will be not quite as we became used to. But I was going to ask you how you felt, but I think you both demonstrated and indicated that you feel more optimistic and more stimulated than you do defeated by the events of the past.
I think that's fair, although I think your analogy is a little bit frail, because 1919, after all, was still connected to the huge roaring river of culture coming out of the 19th century that had not abated and had not been broken up or broken down. I mean, we're living at a time of reinvention of everything, and it is true, and it is sad for somebody who spent a whole life looking at the classical arts that they have gone a bit into eclipse. That's even before COVID-19. Yeah. We all bemoan kind of the gradual and not even slow disappearance of classical values in the art, classical theater, all that. And the fact that, I mean, I'm a family person with 3 grandchildren and 4 kids, and realizing how little even of the literary traditions they carry with them into life. I find saddening. Maybe they're not essential at all, but I find that sad. So I think the COVID means that we're given this opportunity to reinvent the way these things are presented in such a way as they have a fresh appeal and kind of give a fresh start to a generation that's experiencing this early in life, you know, that I think, if anything, the rediscovery of these values may be enhanced and even hastened by this flattening experience. Does that make sense in any way?
Absolutely. I like that. Do either of you have anything you'd like to say to the many colleagues we have in Canada and outside of North America who, as performers, as designers, as directors, as conductors, in other words, people who don't have administrative and teaching positions, virtually lost all of their employment for the next unforeseeable future? Oh. I feel for them a lot. And we have somebody.
It's devastating, Robert. I mean, it truly is devastating. And as hard as it was for me to sit and go, oh, I guess I won't be, oh, the tour for Hummingbird is canceled. Oh, we won't be doing it at the Bauman. Oh, I won't be directing at the Belfry this season, company I adore and wanted to do a fabulous production with. Oh, I won't be at the la, 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 la. As hard as that is, I come at it from where I am in my life and my relationships and ongoing relationships with companies. I look at young people just coming out of training programs, so many that are their experience for Opera on the Avalon was their first time that they were actually going to get to sing professionally, and they were going to get to do it at the National Arts Center. There's the economic impact for the arts. We've been told very clearly we're going to be the last to open, as in any form that we understand, that until there's a vaccine. There's no plexi that will protect. It's going to be a long, long, long time for performing artists. And those kind of realities, whether you can keep yourself alive creatively by doing projects, but there is also a fundamental truth. You need to support yourself economically. The government of Canada, I think, has been very proactive and, from my perspective, helpful with programs, but they are finite, they will end. And the what ifs, especially, as I say, in an industry, as if we think of it as an employment and an industry, as well as our heart's passion, it's devastated. badly hit as cruise ships, as badly hit as whatever. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. And we may very well lose our next John Vickers. We may very well lose our next Tracy Dahl. We may very well lose to a reality of sustaining oneself. And
if I just poke one thing in, also, it's also having a devastating effect on people who are in what we sometimes call mid-career, particularly singers.
Yeah,
sure. Oh, sure.
Time when they're incredibly they're well known already. They're contributing many more dimensions, perhaps, as we get older, and just the prime of their careers. And here they are, Timothy.
No, I mean, the points have been made. I could stress the fact that, you know, I worry about this, not just in terms of our singers that we engage. And of course, I have enormous compassion, and I'm proud of the fact that the company has extended a hand to them in a way that I wish more would. But I also think about, and must think about, our great partners in the symphony. When the symphony cancels a season, think of the musicians, the core of 36 or 7, however many, that suddenly are cut adrift. Many of them young, many of them on their first or second engagement. What's going to happen? They're going to look for work elsewhere. And we're going to lose people. And we won't have the same partner orchestra as has been built up over the years. And I think about, and that's not just a selfish observation either. I think about, especially the young singers, you talk about mid-career, but young singers in that horrible gap between finishing their studies, doing their degrees, going to the study programs, there's so many of them, maybe doing 1 or 2 of them. And then what? Then comes the time when you're out auditioning, when companies are roaring forward, they're filling up the ranks of their young artist programs and stuff. That's all gone. And it's hard enough at the best of times, even for very talented people who are anxious about the future of their lives, who find themselves waiting tables for 2 years in an interim that feels endless and horrible and with little promise, because we all know how it works. Suddenly, all you need is the one in. If you get something from an audition sometime, usually that leads to a chain of events, which you can expect. But it's that gap. Yeah. And there's nothing to be done about it. And there's even less to be done about it now. And that gap is stretched already beyond endurance, I think. So yeah, I'm very worried about the future of the art in terms of the individuals that carry it forward. Yeah.
Yes.
I was so excited for the audience, the audience, Pacific Opera's audience, to be able to see Flight of the Hummingbird. And the young soprano, Sarah Shabbos, who plays Hummingbird, just emailed me today. Here she is. Her life was very much, as Timothy, unfolding. She'd done some programs. Now the work was starting to happen for her. She was doing work with Michael Shada in Europe. She's very excited, and very exciting time for her to literally stop dead, that gone. And she just said, and I've just found out I've received a DORA nomination. That's the big Theater Arts Award nomination for her role as the young Anne Frank in an opera production done in Toronto. And I thought, and we would have gotten, the Pacific Opera family would have seen Sarah and seen her in a wonderful role that she created. And we could have shared the beginning of that, what I know will be a flourishing career. Not to say she won't have, but that opportunity is gone now. And that's sad.
And as Timothy and you both pointed out, the uncertainty. Yeah. There's so much we don't know. That's it.
And the fear that incurs, absolutely.
Absolutely, it's something that's a major concern to, I think, everybody who works in this profession. I would like to end with something a little on the personal side. I'm just wondering, both of you have gardens. Are you getting out into a bit more than you used to?
Okay.
You go, Tim, you go.
Well, you ask this because Glynis and I started meeting before it was even really appropriate. Where? At the nurseries around Victoria. Because Glynis has this gorgeous garden, so beautifully planned. And on the formal end of things, I mean, organized and gorgeous, restful, and beautiful. She concentrates mostly on annuals, so she doesn't have all the hard work of on perennials. She doesn't have the hard work of people that love annuals for their color and have to keep at it all the time. But the thing is beautifully designed. I mean, she has a wonderful designer's eye already. That's why so many of the productions she directs look so good, because she's right in there in terms of contributing to it. In our case, we have a couple of acres out in the country, and it's kind of part of a huge valley, and there is very little formality in this. We have borders and things. We've just recently added some large boxes lining our driveway. So anyway, we now have about, I'd say between 25 and 30 rose bushes that are all incredibly healthy. And you know what it's been like this year, this spring that we're talking about, spring of 2020, long and cool, and nature has loved it, because nature has just, I mean, it's bursting forth. And I've never seen so many roses in our garden. And however unkempt other things might be around the place, those roses, they just feed the soul. You open the door and there they are, singing. It's like singing. It's like a chorus of beauty.
And Timothy and I, to cheer each other up when we weren't meeting illicitly at garden centers, which we had to be very discreet about, we would send pictures, something to make, to lift one's spirits, to lift one's soul. And almost inevitably, they were shots from our gardens, and we shared them with each other. And you, Robert, what gave you joy and comfort during this time?
Well, I think I'm still a work in progress, but as you may notice, one thing that was giving me a great deal of irritation was the completely undisciplined and random way in which white tendrils were poking out of my head and face. So one thing that I did was deal with it.
Trying to get a grip on that.
And there was something amazingly liberating about doing that. But other than that, I do get out onto my balcony and I enjoy even my view of the cathedral. I'm not, I don't have a green thumbs or anything.
Everybody in Victoria knows how lucky we were, because we'd get all these emails from friends and family and colleagues across the country, snow, sleet, snow, sleet. And we're going, well, my daffs are up, or my
I know, it's like, ah.
I hope you didn't torture your friends by sending the pictures to them.
I did.
Of course. What's the point? I mean, come on.
Absolutely. I was much hated across the country.
Well, you're much loved here, as you are, Timothy, and thank you everybody for coming. Thank you so much, Glynis and Timothy, for being part of this.
Thank you, Robert.
And everybody out there, keep your eyes peeled. There is an incredible diversity of topics that we will be addressing in presentations we will be giving. So keep your eyes open, and thanks again. And hoya taho to the two of you.
Ah.
For now.